fans, and welcome back to the Demonland podcast. My name is Andy, and Thor, the god of thunder himself, couldn't stop the D's from locking in a top 4 berth and reclaiming top spot on the AFL ladder, a position we've now held at various times for more than half a year. Joining me tonight is longtime Demonlander George. Good evening, George.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening, everyone. And for those who don't know, tonight's podcast is being broadcast from the cardiac unit at the Royal Melbourne Hospital, which has been overrun with Melbourne Football Club supporter syndrome patients. Tell
you what, they do it to me every week, even when you think, and we'll go into this, but at three-quarter time, I was as positive as I've ever been. I was up and about. Boy, things changed, almost an hour later. All right, we're also joining us tonight, the guy that has been telling me I told you so all year, Bim Man. Good evening, Bim Man.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening, George. Good evening, Demonlanders. And I've got a question for you, Andy. Did you, I'm trying to get a gauge on how serious your MFCSS condition actually is. Now, I know we've talked before that you're doing very well in your various tipping comps. Just
not the last 2 weeks.
Did you tip Melbourne this week?
No, but not because I didn't think we would win. This is all as a ploy to the gods or whoever. For some reason, I didn't pick us last week against Gold Coast. I knew we were going to win and win well. This is all just to try and appease some gods, and then I don't know. It seems to work.
You didn't tip us. You didn't tip us this week or last week?
Nope.
Okay, I was hoping very much you'd say you tipped us this week, because I'm afraid you're.
Why do you think we won?
Worse than I thought it was, because I'm on top of my tipping comp, as I said last week, and a couple actually, and it was really interesting to have a game against West Coast in Perth in front of their home crowd and tip us to win. And look at all of the other tipsters in contention in my various competitions, who also all tipped Melbourne to win, apart from you. So, it's a great sign, isn't it, for where we're at a club, is that other neutrals are confidently picking, and I thought I might be able to pick up a couple on the chasing pack, but everyone picked Melbourne because that's what you do. You pick the team that's going to win, and if you're objective about it, we're always going to win that game, and that's what we did.
When it comes to Melbourne Minds, it's not about tipping, it's all about psychological and reverse psychology, and it seems to work this year. I won't be tipping us this week, and I won't be tipping us against Geelong.
So I take it you're out of your tipping competitions then.
I was well up there, and it wasn't just the Melbourne games that did me in. It was some other games. Let's continue. Let's start this thing. We had pretty much an unprecedented situation, at least where D's fans are concerned. I've heard since then that this has happened in AFLW games. The lightning or the threat of lightning. Do we actually know? Was there actual lightning? Was there?
It was within 10 kilometres. That's the rule. If it's, there were a couple of posters on Demonland who were at the ground and who said it was surreal because it wasn't even raining and you couldn't hear thunder, and so it must have been a ways away. But I think it's what they were banging on about is within 10 kilometres they have to stop.
Are they being too precious, or is this a no H&S thing?
Well, I guess it's the rule to stop them getting electrocuted.
So stopped our momentum, Bin Man. Come on.
I think the AFL probably think, we've got this season. We've almost got it to the final.
We don't need a
death. The last thing we want is the ladder leaders electrocuted. So
I've got pictures in my head, cartoons when you get electrocuted and you see the bones. So basically we were just waiting for the storms to pass, had everyone scrambling for the rule book to see if we would be denied the 4 points or would split the points, whether the match would be abandoned and have to be replayed in part or whole. No one seemed to know what was going on. I'll ask you guys a few questions without going into too much specifics about the first 3 quarters or the final result, or indeed our performance after the break in play, because we'll talk about that in more detail later. But would you have been content to take the 4 points at that time had the game been called off. We had that handy lead and that at that point, and would that have been accepted as a win by the wider football community? Would the legitimacy of the win be doubted? Do we even care about that? George, I might start with you.
Absolutely, we take it. If you kick more goals than the opposition, even in a normal game, you get to win the game. And according to the AFL rules, which obviously Messrs. Taylor and all the commentators at the game struggle to be able to read, the rule basically says you have a 30-minute delay to the game to recommence it. We actually went 29 minutes, so they denied us that possibility with just another minute. If that were to occur and the game is abandoned, then the AFL rules say that the team in front in the second half will win. There's a slightly different rule for halftime, but I was astounded at all the rubbish that was coming from the various commentators about whoever's in front at halftime and will it be played next week and all the other options. Nobody bothered to actually look at the rules. They're pretty easy to find if you use Google, but kept them occupied for a while. But yes, we would take it because we would win in any case.
Oh, totally. I mean, as to the question as whether it would have been accepted, I mean, we were smashing them at that point. And if they hadn't, I mean, who knows? It's all sliding doors, isn't it? But we got out to a 38-point lead, I think, wasn't it? Something like that. And we were pressing. If we hadn't have gone off, the rain was pounding down. So at that point, when they went off, it was howling, the rain. So, there's no way they would have even got close if they'd stayed out there. And the other thing was Nick Mack was out on his feet totally. I mean, I guess we'll talk about this later, but he was completely and utterly exhausted. So
were a lot of them, and we'll get into that.
So a lot of them. So there's no way. So the wider footy community would have given that. They had given it to Melbourne, So of course I would have much preferred them not to come out because I wasn't worried at all that they would reel us in even when the game got going. But my fear was that we'd get injured, we'd cop an injury because, what a recipe. It's like weird. They didn't do an on-ground warm-up, which was strange. They wouldn't
have allowed them. I'm sure there would have been an AFL directive that they can't go out until they're given the all clear.
Well, I don't know why they wouldn't have sent them out for a 5-minute warm-up, then start the game because, doing a run-through in the rooms and, it doesn't seem a very good way to come out and prepare for intense football. And it's interesting, we'll talk about it later, but the stats suddenly skewed really heavily their way in terms of that last quarter and their intensity. And I was just heart was in my mouth that one of our players had get injured. I was just thinking this is a recipe for a bloody, soft tissue injury or collision or, whatever. So if I was hoping, when, as George said, they gave, they've got access to the internet, they're broadcasters, they've got, they've got a rule book, no doubt at some point, some accurate information would have been good quickly. And anyway, when it did come, it said 60 minutes and I was counting it down and hoping it'd get called off.
Well, I had Fox Footy on and Eddie Maguire had his phone out looking up the rules. So no one really knew what was going on. But I'll ask you this then. We'll go on to the next point. How much stock do you take in our performance after that break? We were completely overrun by rampaging Eagles. The umpiring was against us. Our horrible inaccuracy in front of goal almost cost us once again. Prior to the break, we had all the momentum. We had that commanding lead, as you mentioned. They looked gone for all money. You mentioned that too. Then we had almost half an hour break. Bodies cooled down. And remember, this is coming off last week where we spent a day on a plane. We had to back it up and play the next day. Then we had to jet straight off across the country. We're forced to quarantine for a week and then have to play in front of a hostile crowd. We came out firing. We got a good start in the game. And we'll talk about more of that later. We get rain back in the second quarter. And it's at that point that past demon teams would have capitulated and rolled over and then got rolled. And we did the opposite after halftime. We took a commanding lead and effectively did everything we needed to do, but weren't given the opportunity to finish it off. They, on the other hand, were given the opportunity to catch their breath, They were blessed with the opportunity to regroup and be given almost a second chance to give it everything, leave nothing on the field, as they were effectively playing for a final spot. Our performance after the break was more akin to previous years where we bleed goals and can't stop a team on the run. We haven't really seen that version of Melbourne all of this year. So how much stock do you take in our performance after the break, given all of the above, Big Man?
Nothing could be taken from the last 15 minutes of that game, I reckon. It wasn't like old Melbourne at all. I disagree. I think the only thing that you'd take from it was just yet another reminder of how, our poor kicking for goals, and that it definitely will hurt us at some point. But we don't need any more reminders of that. We early on, we had a chance, I think that was after the break, wasn't it, that Spargo had that ridiculous play on where he would have had a shot from 40 metres, not that he would have made the distance. He doesn't seem to be able to make the distance from 30 metres anymore. But we went into save mode with the full 10 minutes of that game to go, so half a quarter. And that's just way too, that's a long time. But as a result, I think we conceded something like at least 10 plus inside 50s, something like that in a row. I saw a graphic come up, and they were just smashing us because we really just would put the sort of go slow. If anything, I reckon if once we decided to do that, we could have looked for more opportunities, even more opportunities to slow it down and chip it around more once we decided to not stop pulling the trigger and attacking. But in the back of all of, in addition to all of the things you were saying, Andy, is that in the back of all the players' mind would have been subconsciously having the game already sort of in the bag, not wanting to get injured. There's so much to play for. Finals are, in touching distance. None of them would have, wanted to get injured. And so consciously, they're probably not thinking that. Subconsciously, I reckon that'd be in their mind. At one point, Lever fell really awkwardly. And it was sort of, he was looking, the ground was slippery. So as I said before, it was a recipe for an injury. And, for me, it made sense. We saved energy. We didn't press. We sort of avoided the contested ball. I don't know what the numbers were, but I'd seen the contested ball numbers through the game, and they ended up 4 ahead. But so they must have smashed us in that last 15 minutes in contested ball. But the main thing is that we didn't cop any injuries, and we still won by nearly 2 goals. So it's not like they, that they overran us. We didn't have enough time. I thought we milked it pretty well. So even if the game had have continued at the point when the Lightning came, I reckon we would have done what we often do and put the cue in the rack anyway. It just would have ended up being a 6, 7, 8 goal win. As I was saying, the rain was, lashing down. We'd trapped the ball in our forward half. So, we were going to win that game. And as I said, the thing that Nick Naitanui, I reckon, said horribly overrated footballer, and he is so unfit, and we were running on top of the ground, and that advantage was completely taken away. So, I don't think anything can be taken out of it in terms of criticising Melbourne or some sort of sign that we don't manage things well, or, if anything, I would have, once they decided to go slow, they could have even gone slower and looked for the chip around pass a bit more. But, that's probably a pretty mild critique.
George?
Yeah, nothing much more to add to that. I'll just take away what Gawn said immediately after the match when he was interviewed coming off the ground, where they said they tried to relax and stay calm, but it didn't work. You always knew that West Coast were going to come out firing. They had nothing to lose. They'd been rested, as Binman had said, and you as well. Nick Nat's only good for a short cameo appearance, and he had 15 minutes of cameo. Elliot Yeo's probably the same. And Goody, in his post-match interview, noted again we were completely smashed around the contest post the return to the field. I think the really good thing is that in this situation, they were throwing absolutely everything at us in a similar manner to what the second quarter was like, and we held up. If the game had actually, if the resumption of play had actually gone on for another 10 minutes, for example, I reckon we would have won that game by 5 goals. They would have run out of steam. They'd thrown everything at us, and they had nothing left in the tank, which is what they were prior to the Lightning stuff happening. So the really good thing I think we can take from this is you can be guaranteed that the opposition, when we get to finals, will do exactly the same. They will throw everything at us at some stage. We've now proven in a couple of games that we can hold up. The defence holds up strong. The rest of the team holds up strongly. And then we resume a normal operation. So in terms of preparations for finals, perversely, this is very good practice for us.
Yeah, I reckon that's the two excellent points there, George. That one about us absorbing pressure and pushing away afterwards is spot on. If you look at through the season, we've done that so often where we've been able to absorb the pressure from a team where, as we've talked about, footy's so much a momentum game. We've been able to absorb a team when they do get on top. Goodwin says it all the time, is that it's inevitable the opposition will get on top at some point. I totally agree. They would have absorbed it if we weren't even looking to attack in that last 15 minutes. We just weren't even, we weren't even trying to overlap run because we didn't need to. As you said, they're the ones who are motivated to do it, and we absorbed that. If we needed to, we then would have pushed forward. And they, as you say, they were out on their feet. And I know we'll talk about it, but that for me, that was a big feature of the third quarter, is that they gave everything they could in that second quarter, and then it was our turn to throw the punch. So in the third quarter, and they couldn't stand up to it. So the other factor in that. That last 15 minutes was the umpiring was just appalling. Now, it was just ridiculous. Some of the frees they got, but as always the case, it's not the frees given, it's the ones not given. And there was one where Gawn was shoved straight in the back, and it was either Kennedy or Darling who marked it, but he was shoved clean in the back, and they ended up scoring from it on their half-forward flank. And that was just one of, there were... I think there was something like in the last, I think I read on Demonland there was sort of something 11-2 or something in that last quarter.
10-2 in that last 15 minutes, I
10-2 in that last 15 minutes. I know we've talked about it before, but it's simply not on, and I don't mind if they're there.
The one that Kennedy got when he got a goal, just... Yeah.
The one that really made me laugh was not so much the free kick, but May's reaction was the free kick that Kennedy got from May supposedly shoving him.
Yeah, that's the one I was talking about.
Yeah, and one, it's just ironic because Gawn gets shoved in the back bloody 30 times a game. But two, May was just distraught. And he says to the umpire, I think the umpire said something like, yeah, no, you came late and pushed him. And May said... It was
in the contest.
May said, I held back to not hurt him. And when they showed the replay, he instead of running through him like he could have, because he was slightly late to the contest, he sort of opened his chest up and just bounced into him. And then the other one was, I can't remember actually if it was the last quarter, but maybe it wasn't the last quarter, but Rivers was given a free kick for pushing the back, and he marked it. And as he said to the umpire, he's like, but I marked it.
Yeah. You're allowed to do that. That's...
Yeah. Well, particularly this year, they've seemingly given up on, pushing the back as a free kick.
Well, given all that, how nervous were you in those final few minutes? Because they did get pretty close, right when the sirens got, then they almost took another mark in front of goal. Could have kicked a goal, could have got straight, could have got a free kick in the middle and kicked it out and taken another mark. Were you nervous? My MFCSS was in overdrive. As you can imagine, I was petrified that the Eagles would pinch a victory from the jaws of defeat from their end. Did any of you actually think the worst could happen?
I was watching the clock all the way down, so and just doing the maths all the time. They've got 10 minutes to go. They've got to kick 4 goals, that sort of scenario. But what was really telling for me, and I had confidence with a couple of minutes to go, were the really telling marks that I think Brown took one down on the wing. There was just Jackson might have done similar. Spargo took a ripper in a contested situation just to take time off. But the one that really struck me was, it was the final bounce with what was it, about a minute 30 to go or something like that, and Oliver's clearance from the middle, as soon as he got his hands on it, and then I think he delivered it to Spargo out wide. It was just brilliant. Game was over then. That was it. No more chances. And again, it comes back to what we were talking about before about the change in the maturity of this group. You're being pressed, you're being pushed. It only needs you to do a couple of the right things at the right time, and you will be successful. And it's exactly what happened.
Yeah, exactly the same as me, George. I wasn't nervous because I was basically looking at the clock the whole time and thinking they're not going to make it. They haven't got time. They got down to 5 minutes and they got 2 goals quick. So then I was thinking, there's still 2 goals in that. At that point, they needed 2 goals still when it was that bounce that you mentioned. So 90 seconds to go, 9 points. They needed 2 goals to win. I was thinking, well, the only way that it would be possible would be to get 2 clearance directly from the centre. And soon, obviously, as soon as Oliver won that was gone. But so I wasn't particularly nervous. Having said that I thought, it's going to criticising the umpire, I would have paid that mark to, it was Darling, wasn't it? And it wouldn't have mattered. It would have just made it a 3-point margin.
Oh, that couldn't have been a mark.
Well, he stuck it for a while, and so did Brown earlier. But in any case, so I wasn't particularly nervous because there just wasn't time, and they were holding it. As I said, if anything, I would have liked to have seen the D's chip it around a bit earlier. Rather they kick once and then go for that long kick down the line every time. They needed it once they decided not to try and attack and score a goal, which they clearly did. They needed to look backwards a few times, but they just don't do it. So that very often. So maybe if they're drilled to do it.
The only free or was a 50-metre penalty that they didn't get that they should have, I absolutely don't care about because of all the other things that they did. They got was the petty one because that was.
I love that. That was fantastic.
50 metres any day of the week. I'd be furious if that happened against us and wasn't paid.
Right. Well, it wouldn't have mattered. That wouldn't have mattered.
I know, but still, I'd be furious.
Interesting one about the Oliver clearance though, because then I did think, oh Christ, don't tell me this would be. I wasn't particularly worried, but I thought, well, this would be remarkable. Like how, it's like a 1 in 100 thing, but, 1 in 100 to 1 shots get up sometimes. Was Gawn hit it towards their goal, George? Did you notice that? I mean, maybe it was the play, but still a risky play because didn't he earlier in the season, was it the Crows game he did that and they got it out of the centre?
No, I can only remember the Crows game when it was in the forward pocket and he hit it the wrong way instead of trying to hit it through the goals.
Yeah, but I thought that was a curious decision to hit it over the back of his head towards their goal. Maybe it was their set play, but a gutsy one. I mean, it come off. But it came off only because Oliver hit that ball with such pace and was able to control it. And I mean, his hands in the wet are just incredible, aren't they?
Let's talk about the other quarters where we set up the victory. First quarter against the Eagles in Perth is really important. You want to take the crowd out of the equation as much as you can, not let that momentum of the 19th man plus the 3 umpires have an impact early on the game so you can get a good start because, later in the game it's going to come in handy for them. We did that and we had a 14-point lead at the first break. What did you like about the first quarter, George?
Yeah, the first quarter was always going to be a ripper. You've got 2 teams, one who's not just challenging for a top spot, but actually trying to stay in the top 4. With results going the other way. So there was a lot at stake for Melbourne, for West Coast. They were trying to cement their spot in the 8, and again a lot of challenges in and around that 7, 8, 9, 10 mark. So yeah, it was always going to be a good match, as you said. Played in Perth with their horrible feral crowd. Which subsequently, and it's always been the case, it seems, influencing the umpires with decisions. And before the game, we've lost T-Mac, and it's going to be a wet game from all previous reports. So it is going to be a slog, and that's exactly what it turned out to be, particularly in the first quarter. We got off to a great start. It wasn't raining initially, and what I was really surprised with was the ability of a number of players, particularly our marking players, to be able to mark the ball cleanly in those sort of conditions. We got Brown goaled early, courtesy of a 50-metre penalty, but it was Brown who was running up the ground and creating the opportunities for the halfbacks to be able to deliver to him, so it was great. We had a couple of silly errors from a couple of the usual sinners, which gifted them a goal, but we certainly responded quickly. A and B picked up a very nice crumb to give it to Petrarca, who goaled on a single snap from around the 50 mark. But then we reverted to type in a little way. Max had a set shot that went one side of the goals to the other. Ben Brown marked it over the other side, and then a very tight angle, but his went completely the other way across to the other side. So the goal kicking was we weren't doing the getting the best out of it. Jackson missed a set shot that fell short while they were kicking from a fair distance out. But once again, it was just long points that we were scoring. A and B picked up a really nice crumbing goal as well. Max did an absolute ripper of a forward punch, which he knocked to Brown, who snapped again from 40 metres out or so, and we goaled. They replied. Kennedy did a great mark out at 50 and nailed a ripper. The good thing was we finished up with a 14-point lead at the end of that. It was a real hard slog, and we were in front. So that was a really good sign for us that we had put everything into this game and into this quarter, and we were still in front. So it sort of set up the rest of the game. We didn't know what was to come, but we'll kick it across to others to talk about the subsequent quarters.
The second quarter, seemed a little bit flat. I don't think we could get anything going. They got the ascendancy with a bit of help from the Maggots. I thought we were lucky, Bin Man, to be 4 points up at halftime, even with the goal by Cozzy on the siren. In your mind, Bin Man, what went wrong? What went right for us in the second quarter?
Yeah, just on the first quarter, George nailed it. The commentators were sort of discounting the way West Coast were playing. I thought, as you say, George, it was a real slog in that first quarter, and I thought they were terrific in terms of their intensity and their pressure, West Coast. And they were playing sort of a different type of footy, and maybe it was the conditions. They weren't looking to sort of hold and chip it around like they like to do. So I thought we did really well to lead, but just shows the incredible importance of defence, because really it was a couple of terrible defensive lapses, including that goal that you mentioned to Nibbler, to allow a ball to get over the top of a contest and have a free player out the back. And there was a later one, and Melksham got in the third quarter as well. Simply almost exactly the same. That's just unforgivable. And that's a complete defensive breakdown. I don't think the way the commentators talk about it is if West Coast weren't on, and I don't think that's the case. I thought they really brought their intensity from the beginning. They looked a bit nervous, and so they turned it over a bit, and they carried that intensity into the second quarter. And I totally agree, Andy. I thought we were lucky. In fact, texted a mate to say exactly that at halftime. We were really lucky to be 4 points. I mean, the bottom line is the second quarter was sort of a longer version of that last 15 minutes. They threw everything at us, as George was talking about before. And I think, I can't remember what the contested possessions were at the end of the first quarter, but I think it was pretty level. By the end of that quarter, they were 14 contested ball up. And we're number one contested ball team in the AFL. And I think they're right down the bottom, sixth. I wouldn't be surprised if they're 18th, or at least in the last few weeks. And they smashed us physically, and their contested ball was brilliant. Yo was great in that space. So, that's a huge, maybe they were up at quarter time, a little bit. It can't have been too much. But so they had plus 12 contested ball minimum in that quarter. And I think that was the tail of the tape in terms of why, they were able to get in front. I think the key, actually, it reminded me a lot of the Brisbane-Melbourne game. And when we talked about this, the key, of course, for us was that we got going in the third quarter. But really where we won that game was not allowing them to get a lead in that second quarter. And again, it goes back to how effective our system is. So unlike them, who gave up an easy goal to Nibbler through a complete defensive breakdown in their system, we didn't give up any easy goals. They had to work. They had the momentum for that entire quarter on the back of all of that work, and they just couldn't really take advantage of that. And for me, that's really our sort of footy at Melbourne's game in a nutshell this year, is that other teams, when they're on top, they just can't take full advantage of being on top. When we're really on top, we take advantage of it, and that's the difference. If so often in the past we would have been thrilled with our first quarter. We had a great first quarter. Would have come out, and they dominate. They got a goal late in the end of first quarter, which was super important. It gave them the energy to come into the second. They got an early goal in the second. Suddenly it was really close, and then it felt like an arm wrestle on the scoreboard, but they were on top. But we made it an arm wrestle on the scoreboard just because of how strong our defensive systems is. And it's really important to note in that we lost Hunt early. So he injured his ankle, came off at the 12-minute mark of the first quarter, and then didn't come back on till beginning of the second, or maybe at the end of the first, but only spent a few minutes on the ground before he came off. So he's a key player in our defensive structure, gives us all of that run. The way he sets up, they look for him left and right, as when they're marking to give off to. Suddenly he had to take out there. I think they put Jordan back. I think maybe Gus played a bit more defensive stuff as well. So they had to adjust to that. That was something that they had to adjust to. But even with that need to adjust, they were able to keep their defensive structure and not give up any easy goals. So for me, that was essentially where we won the game. Of course, the third quarter is where we put it on the scoreboard and got ahead, and that was game over. But maybe it's a better way of thinking of it, is we stayed in the game. And I think critical moments, I was really critical of, we'll talk about Jake Melksham's game a bit later, but there was a crucial contest where his second and third effort got it down the wing. I don't know what McGovern was thinking, not taking that ball out, but handballing it back inside, and Melksham following up to get that free kick, which was a free kick every day of the week. Just drives me nuts to sit, the Leopard's suggestion that it wasn't to Cozzy. He just, he hit a round arm to his head. That was such an important goal by Cozzy, because we went in with a lead where, as you say, it's exactly right. We didn't deserve that. Deserve's not the right word, but we were lucky to go ahead with a lead, and it was our turn to come into the break with the energy.
How many times has that happened to us, where an opposition team has got one in junk time at half-time and gone in all G'd up and then come out and roll
up? Other than going with the energy, and they would have come into the rooms, and it's exactly as George said before, they gave them everything they could. You couldn't, if you were a West Coast fan, you would have been thrilled with that effort in that second quarter. They would have come in, sat down on those white plastic chairs and said, bloody hell, we're still 2 points down. Yeah. And so that was huge, I think, that we didn't allow them to get away from us, and huge that we were able to score a goal. I think that was really just about our only meaningful attempt on goal for that quarter as well. So massive in the context of the game, I think.
And on that free kick, they 1,000% would have received a free kick for that in their forward line.
Anyone should. He swung. Doesn't matter if you drop a bit. If you swing your forearm like that in a swinging motion and hit him in the head, it's got to be a free kick. Doesn't matter if they drop down a little bit.
The premiership quarter, the third quarter, we won the match. 5 goals. That's where we won the match, as you mentioned. 5-1, 32-point lead at 3-quarter time. That set us up. George, you want to take us through the third? Things you liked there?
Yeah, the third was. I think the third was set up because of the second. A couple of things that Binman was talking about there. West Coast had thrown absolutely everything at us, and had effectively got nowhere with it, particularly with that Pickett goal on the 3-quarter on the siren. They would have been deflated, and it certainly looked like it as soon as they came out. A and B got snagged a goal from rucking from Brown in the forward line. And again, Brown's shown a propensity to do this, just to be able to hit the ball or hit it sideways to players who are free. So he's been not only a great forward, but also a great visionary in the forward line to be able to see the opportunities there. So A&B got an early goal, but then umpire Nichols gave West Coast another easy shot at goal to back it up. But from there on in, we just ripped them apart. Jackson just went berserk in the ruck, and it was interesting. I was thinking at the time, Max isn't in the ruck here for a long, long time. Must have been about 10 minutes. Jackson was taking on that Nui, and I thought, this could get really ugly. But Jackson held his own and then gave back even more. So he was involved in a couple of goals, one to Harms in particular. Jackson took some fantastic marks in that third quarter. Again, you forget how wet it was. It was pouring down at the start of that quarter. So to be able to hold them in those conditions was just exemplary. Shows his real talent. What then happened was Max Gawn returned to the ruck with about 8 minutes to go, I think, in the quarter, and within a couple of minutes we'd scored another 2 goals. That Jackson had worn Nick Nat down and Vardy down, and then the assassin came in the terms of Gawn, and he just created the opportunities for the others up the other end. So it was really interesting for me from a coaching perspective to see how we were using the players and in what order to be able to gain the best advantage. And so we go into three-quarter time effectively 5 goals up, which was just fantastic. They were completely out at that stage. But, yeah, it was truly the premiership quarter.
And there you go. That set us up to win the game despite what happened after that. Crazy stuff. I was trying to explain it to my wife the next morning because she'd fallen asleep, and it just didn't. I didn't do it justice, unfortunately.
Just some stats from that quarter. I mean, it's exactly right in terms of we just sort of swamped them really. And what I loved, it sort of gets back to what I was talking about last week, is we got our swarm back. We were swarming them, and so there were multiple players at the contest, multiple options to give it off. We got our handball game going, even in the sort of slippery conditions, and we strangle teams. We sort of suck the oxygen out of the opposition, and they start getting panicky. We get when that happens, that sort of phrase about getting the game on your own terms. It's exactly the case. So that second quarter, I said they won. They were up 14 contested possessions. We won the contested possessions in that quarter, I think something 28-20 or something. We won the clearances. So it was a really interesting game from the clearances. Pretty much a lot of the stats were very similar, same number of inside 50s. Our clearances both around the ground and in the centre were similar, but we scored more from our clearances. We got 3 goals from boundary line throw-ins. And we just really ran over the top of them. And Nick Nui, I saw a stat, and Nathan Vardy didn't register a disposal in the third quarter. Luke Jackson and Gawn combined for 9. That's massive for your 2 ruckmen not to get a possession in a full quarter of footy. Is remarkable. And we had 9 of the last 10 coming into just on the end of third quarter. We had 9 of the last 10 inside 50s, just sort of evidence of that swarming that we were doing. So, we came into the end of that quarter. They were completely both out on their feet physically, but we had them mentally. And that's how the last quarter began as well. We were just completely on top of the game. So, that sort of goes to, if it, in normal circumstances, obviously the game's not stopped. We just would have kept rolling and chipped it around from kept our 6 goals, 5-goal lead, whatever. So it was a hugely impressive quarter of footy from the D's, and it just that we look like a good footy team who came out and said, yeah, the opposition's given it their best shot. We're going to show them what we've got.
Well, that was a bit of an episode of Lost, talking about the last quarter and then doing a couple of flashbacks to earlier quarters. But let's talk some individual performances. Alex Neil-Bullen, I thought Nibbler was excellent in his 100th game. for the club. We've been critical of Nibbler in the past, despite recognising his aerobic abilities. And I guess the criticism in the past has been on the back of a lack of pressure and scoreboard pressure. But I think we've seen a huge improvement from Nibbler in these areas this season. And he capped off a great milestone game with 8 tackles, 21 pressure acts, 8 score involvements. One in particular setting up a Track's monster goal and a nice snap goal himself. George, how did you see Nibbler's game?
Yeah, this was the best game that I think that he's ever played with the club.
Breakout game for Nibbler.
Breakout game after 100, but we'll take it. We'll take it in this particular game. What I was really amazed with, and it was the same with Harms. So they perform better in these tight, contested type of games. I don't think they are over endowed with skills, and the skills need to be seen when conditions are good. But when things are where you've just got to scrap in and get in there and get the ball and put in, and the opponent can't get away from you as easily, I think that's when you see the best of it. So, yeah, he was fantastic this year in this particular game. There was one other point I was just like to bring up, and that was in terms of just going back one step in terms of the coaching, was that once again. And Bin Man will probably pick up on this later, we had 7 players this week play over 90% of the game. What that meant, particularly in the wet conditions that we've been talking about, was that players like Harms and Jordan and even Vandenberg and Rivers and Sparrow only played low minutes, but they were really impactful minutes. I was surprised with Harms, for example. He only played 54%. But when he came on, he really made an impact in the game. But that comes down to the coaching. If you can utilise these players as shock troops in these situations, and that was certainly the case with Neil Bullen and with Harms, they really showed their best. So, brilliant big tick to the coaching staff for the way they utilise those players.
I mean, on a related point, I have no doubt whatsoever we're seeing the benefit now of them reducing their loads because they all look fresher. Nibbler looked fresh, but, just on Nibbler, said we sort of underrate him. I've never underrated Nibbler, and he's just about my favourite Melbourne player. And I just think he's a chronically underrated footballer for the D's. And he's been fantastic. And through that period when we were down and we were struggling, he was him and Hunt were the only two. I think I said this a couple of weeks ago. Those two were the only 2 players in our team who lifted their player rated during that period. He was fantastic through that period when we were playing poorly. I've always put a lot of stock in players who play well in losing games, and he's been remarkably consistent last year and this year. And you don't always see, you don't like a breakout games of it sort of. It sort of downplays his importance.
No,
I think
it was a bit of a joke, bit of a light-hearted.
Yeah, but I just think he plays such as I said a couple of weeks ago when George was talking about him being dropped. He plays such a critical role in our pressure and our running and our defensive spread. I looked at the tracker at half time, and remarkably, Ben Brown was 11 kilometres. And he, or maybe it was at that break actually, but he's right up there. Him and Brown actually, and Langdon, they're all up around the 11 kilometres, and he's just a fantastic footballer, and I think he's a real, it's a real sort of, I guess, indication of how he's considered by the club that he's in the leadership group this year, and I think he's really important on the field and off the field in terms of his commitment to training and his professionalism, and he's a sort of a culture player. So, but it was awesome to see him have such a great game in his 100th. So, remember he was sort of his claim to fame when he first came to the D's was he was mates with Billy Stretch.
Yep.
Who would have thought that Nibbler's going to go on to play 100 games, and I guess Stretch is playing. I don't know if he's playing SANFL still. But yeah, their paths have diverged, haven't they?
Certainly have. Let's move on. Luke Jackson had another fantastic game in front of his home crowd. We simply have to do whatever it takes to keep this kid on this side, on our side of the Nullarbor. 21 possessions, 11 contested, 6 marks. Held his own in the ruck when Max was resting, as you mentioned, and he's only 19, boys. Big man.
He was fantastic, wasn't he? He's marking. I think he's definitely one that's benefited from the loads easing off because he's running over the top of the ground, but his marking's improved and his kicking, he's shot for goals kicking, and he looks like he's got a pretty sort of solid technique. So there's no reason why he shouldn't have a good accuracy with his field kicks as well. He was fantastic, clearly up and about. You said, Andy, you watched Fox. Did you see him interviewed afterwards by Eddie McGuire? And he was on Zoom, and I thought when he first came up on telly, some bogan must have Zoom bombed Fox footy, but he's such a funny young bloke and he's so enthusiastic. He was talking about playing in front of his mates and his family, and he's just he must have said it 5 times how much he loves playing footy and how much he loved playing in a close game, and so not only is he extraordinary, I mean, it's easy to forget he's only 19. Amazing. Probably Nick Nat's the only sort of comparable ruckman that same age, and he was talking about Nick Nat being a hero of him growing up. I think, Jesus, because Nick Nat's 29, I think, or 31. He's 31, and but he was terrific and such good energy, I think, and not good energy on the field and off the field. And I think that 1-2 is a really unique thing we've got going, because as George has made this point, almost every other team's second ruckman drops off. Yeah,
he's usually who's this guy? You don't even know his name.
He was their second ruckman. So, we've got Luke Jackson who comes in, who's, people are saying pretty regularly on Demonland, he's better than Max, which, when he rucks, I mean.
Anything to add there, George?
Yeah, I just reinforce that he's 19 years of age. It's just incredible, as a ruckman. You don't, Max took, 4 or 5 years to mature, but, by the time Max was 24, 25, but this guy's 19 years of age. It's very easy to forget that. I really love his, you can see it with the basketball background, his ability not just to hit the ball in the air or he reads the ball beautifully to be able to mark it, but it's his second efforts from that basketball background. Yeah. The ball hits the ground. He is just as mobile as any other mid in there, and the number of times he was in there scrapping, but also having the vision to get the ball out in tight situations is just, well, there is no other ruckman in the league at the moment who's comparable in terms of that.
Yeah, he mentioned in that interview, George, he mentioned basketball. They asked him about, what does he like? Does he like rucking and being up involved? And he said, he thinks it's from his basketball background. He wants to be up wherever the ball is. Wherever the ball is, he wants to go. He said he's always been like that. And he said that he thinks that might be sort of related to playing basketball, where you always want to be where the ball is. So you're right, though, in his ability to follow up and get ground ball. There was a couple of times where that was really important. He was involved in a goal in that third quarter where I think he took the ruck on the sort of half-back line and ended up in the chain. Might have even been the one that ended up Harms.
That was Harms' goal, yeah.
Yeah, it was just a fantastic bit of exactly what your point is, that and I guess the criticism that we've both made of Wiedemann is that he was involved on the half-back flank and involved twice more again and we ended up in a goal, whereas, it's just brilliant, isn't it, to remain involved in the contest. And it's the ones where they do that sort of running, and even if they don't get the ball, that's a basketball thing too, is that the help defense concept. And, he's always in there. And, I think, as you say, it's incredible. I think he's only 19.
Is he a left footer?
No.
Okay, no, because I'm watching the video of the week on Demonland, and it's that play you're talking about, and he's kicked it down to Melksham to mark it, and the kick was a very good kick, but it looked awkward off the boot, and it was with the right foot, so I thought perhaps he is a left footer. Let's move. George, do you know his contract status? I know we did.
Not off the top of my head.
I know we did get an extension last year, like a 2-year extension, but I think we've got to put something in front of him
Oh yeah. We definitely do not want to lose this guy.
The book at him, the checkbook that is. All right, let's move on. Ben Brown. I don't know who doubted Ben Brown would be an asset to this footy club, but without him playing last night, we don't win this match. T-Mac was out. Fritsch was out of sorts. I don't think Weed would have given us the same output, and despite the conditions, Brown was able to mark or bring the ball to ground. He provided leads up the ground. He's kicked 3 goals from 7 marks, as well as having 6 score involvement. Not huge disposal numbers with just 8. And I say this all the time. If you're a forward, you're not getting big numbers, you better be putting on scoreboard pressure in terms of goals or score involvements. And he did all of that. I really like this guy. And I don't know what the commentators were on about, thinking, oh, well, maybe he'll be in the mix for finals. He is in the mix for finals. He is in this team.
And I've got to have, Andy, I've got to have a vent about these.
Have it, take it now.
Commentators.
I'll forget about it, so you can talk about them now, and then we'll talk about Brown.
Well, yeah, let's absolutely come back to Brown, but I need to take this opportunity to vent. It drives me insane how poor the commentary is, and that was just one of a million examples. It's like I was thinking, what are you talking about? There's no way this fella's coming out of this team. He's not playing, and they must have said it 3-4 times, all of them in different ways. Eddie Maguire, when they took their break on the Channel 7 replay, they were on the in the commentary, they were saying, it's time to take his chance, and he's absolutely in our finals team. There's no question about it. And to even think about, and exactly as we've talked about, his marking and his ability to convert is why. So, that was number one of the sort of hit parade of stupidity. And the other one was is Lepper, who's I've enjoyed, as I've said before in the podcast, Lepper on SEN, and he's got an interesting way of sort of talking about the game, and it's quite engaging to understand that. And he's been generally a good addition to Channel 7, but he seems to be going the way of every special comments person that's 7 higher. It's like invariably, those sort of special comments people are recently retired ex-footballers, coaches. He was with Richmond last year, and then he's retired out of the game, or at least he's in media as the only part. Sort of his involvement in footy, and it seems to be their knowledge becomes.
It's an interesting question. Just came.
Oh, sorry about that.
So the knowledge becomes less useful and insightful in direct correlation to how long they've been out of the game. And he was talking. He just seems to be knowing less and less about football. And so at one point he said when Melksham marked, which was terrific, he was pumping Melksham up as the ultimate competitor. I was thinking, I don't reckon even Melksham's mum would agree with that assessment. And then just not long afterwards, they were talking about Bowie, and he said that they really liked his speed, and Goody really liked his speed and really to run, his ability to run and carry from defence, because it's something we really needed. Saying, well, what are you talking about? We've got Hunts, we've got Rivers. And, of all people, Richo corrected him to suggest, with Hunt off the ground, that's even more important. I mean, we've got plenty of run off the halfback flank, and, it was, and then on top of that, at the free kick, Nibbler didn't give away, which was completely the right call in that last quarter, where I forget the West Coast player, one of the bald-headed fellas, dropped his knees. Umpire said, you've dropped your knees. And even before, so to explain why he didn't pay it, almost as the play was still going. And Lepper said that he saw no difference to the one cos he got on half-time. They were completely and utterly different. One was a free kick, one wasn't a free kick. That was, and then forget the rest of them, Brian Taylor and, I could go on all night, but just awful.
You mentioned a bald Eagles player. You weren't referring to umpire Nichols, were you? These commentators.
Was that a drum, Tish?
Yeah, that was. when it's good, it's that. When the joke doesn't land, it's.
Right.
It's that. Anyway, the commentators.
Ben Brown.
No, before we go to Ben Brown, just last thing on the commentators. We've been on Channel 7 quite a lot this year. So the commentators have seen us quite a bit. But they have, and I get that they commentate a lot of games during the year, so a lot of players and a lot of teams.
Job.
But it is their job, and they should be prepared. But commentators just, they have no idea about us, and most of them, as I said, have been commentating games all year for us. They said something about, I can't even remember who it was, one of the players, and I couldn't believe that they wouldn't know because they've spoken about that player before in a totally different way, and they either just get mixed up, they mix up players, I don't know, I can't remember who said it, what it was about, but and it could have been any one of those Muppets because they're all the same to me. I wish I could listen to it on mute or choose some other commentary.
People have said that, but I need the crowd noise and all of the umpiring, and so if there was a way to filter it out, I would in a heartbeat, but you're right, that happens all the time. And Brian Taylor was calling Hunt's off with an ankle injury, and he's calling him Langdon.
Yeah,
I mean, it's because he's got a longish hair in a long sleeve jumper.
Yeah. Ben Brown.
Ben Brown. He was fantastic, wasn't he? He was just really everything that you want in a full forward. And I was thinking of you, George, actually, just the way he does things professionally. So, he kicks well. And he's starting to stretch out, but physically he looks a completely different player. I mean, he talked, I think it was after the Port game that he'd done a 12-week block of training, and he looks physically a different player. And you could see he's getting up and down the ground. He's really doing a lot of running. As I said, I think it was either at halftime or when they had that break from the Lightning. He was second on our most distance covered behind Langdon at that point. It really surprised me, and I thought he played that role that T-Mac did of getting up the ground really importantly, and took a couple of really important contested marks up on the wing, including in that last quarter, as I think one of you noted. And the other one was his mark from a brilliant bit of play from the centre, and Gawn kicking on his left foot. That was just the perfect situation for, they're the ones we just haven't been marking. Straight in front, big pack mark. And when, I think as George said, when we were talking about him weeks and weeks ago, when he's stretching up his arms, he's close to 7 foot at the top of his arms and sort of any jump even on top of that. So he's going to be fantastic come finals.
He's a slightly different player, I think, than what we recruited from North Melbourne. I think he's covering a lot more ground than what he ever did there. He's tended to be more of an inside 50 player there and a go-to target. But boy, is he is working a long way up the ground, as you've seen from the coverage on the coverage maps on the screen. So, but yeah, he doesn't get any shorter during the game, and I think that really troubled, particularly. After West Coast had lost Hearn, that really threw McGovern back to try and cover someone who is just so tall.
And that mark he took, example of that was that mark he took in the third in the goal square.
Yeah, he just has to stand there, and he doesn't get any shorter during the game, but he's back. He's got his confidence back, which is always very important for forwards. But it's his contributions, not just running up the ground, but some of those marks were really, really telling when they were needed. And especially with T-Mac not being available during the game, he had a lot of work to cover that hole, and he did it, and he did his own job as well. But we're also starting. And probably you don't see as much in this particular game, but the fact that he's there gives the opportunities to those other people around him as well. The Nibbler goal, a couple of Nibbler goals, I think, were on the back of Brown's work. So yeah, he's doing absolutely everything that we wanted him to be, and it's certainly coming at the right end of the season.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's interesting because he didn't have huge numbers, as you're saying, Andy, but he had a couple of tackles, which is what you want to see. Mm-hmm. He had some contested possessions. He had 3 contested possessions. But he's a really sort of neat and solid field kick as well. Like, he's got good technique. We've talked a lot about some of these players coming in, like Jordan, and I reckon Bowie's in the same sort of thing with high footy IQ. He's a player with high footy IQ, and he's a player who sort of came through VFL, didn't he? And he's sort of almost rewarded for his footy IQ. And I thought there was one bit of play, the goal he got where he snapped off his foot, and again off one step. Again, it was poor defence to leave him, but it was just smart footy. He was out in front, he was there for it, and he knew that he didn't have time to, he took the shot immediately, but just neat technique. He cleared 40, 50 metres with that kick off one step and around the body. It was a really important time to kick the goal, but his marking is only, is only going to get stronger and more important. They're worth their weight in gold, contested marks, and he's going to be huge, as I say, come finals.
Welcome back to Jake Melksham. Again, didn't get a lot of the footy with only 8 disposals, but he did hit the scoreboard twice. Was involved in a few others. Is there a place for Jake in the 22, George?
It's going to be a difficult decision, isn't it, for the football department?
Because T-Mac obviously will be back within a week or two, hopefully this week.
Yeah, I think the difficulty is... and we've spoken about this in his previous appearances. He had 87% game time in this game for only 8 touches. Are we getting enough out of him? Because,
if he kicks 2 goals, yes, but if not, no.
Yeah, but if that's all he's doing, that's nice. Fritsch almost had exactly the same statistics, apart from the fact that he didn't kick the 2 goals, but he probably didn't get the same opportunities. You can only take the opportunities that are given to you. Can we afford Melksham and Fritsch in the same forward line? Because neither of them really provide a great deal of defensive pressure. Even in this game, and again, it's a pity that you can only watch it on television, but I was seeing occasionally the Jake Melksham of old, trotting along behind the rest of the play. You can afford one player in the side, but can we afford 2? I don't know. It'll be, like I said, a really difficult decision for the football department. His kicking is superb. Once he's got the ball in his hand, he is lethal. But if that's all he can provide, there may not be a spot for him coming into the future.
Yeah, I'm convinced Goody wants him in the team. Convinced of it, and like
for finals. Yeah,
for finals. I just think that. I think his ability to hit kicks under pressure is good. He needs it. I mean, I think he recognises the same thing we all recognise of our kicking issues. As we talked about last year as well, I just sort of have a really strong confirmation bias against him, and particularly in regards to his intensity and pressure. And I thought he was terrible in the first half, generally up until that bit of play that I mentioned, which ended up being critical and it saved him. But for me, I was over him. There was a couple, again, maybe it's because I'm looking at it, but he corrals where he, instead of running at the player, which is, I just think, don't do that. It just shits me. And he does it all the time. And there was another where the sort of their halfback, true centre halfback, where he should have gone hard at a contest and sat off it. And it's just not the Melbourne brand. It's a cliche, but that was his turn to go and he didn't. He won me over with that effort to set up Cossie's goal, and it ended up being really important. And his pressure was much, much better in the second half, much better. So for me, if he can keep, much better, still not brilliant. He only had 1 tackle for the game. His sort of influence, it's easy to overstate because he does that brilliant kick, and, he's the best shot for goal. He's the best kick. He's the only player in that team, even with Salem, that I would have given any chance to kick that ball from the boundary, or been confident. I was confident that he would get it. It was such a clever, he's a right footer. He kicks that on the left. He did exactly what he needed to do off 1 step. But he only had 4 score involvements. So, Nibbler had 8 score involvements. So it's easy to overstate it because of those things. He definitely had a much better second half, but I think it's also worth noting through the game, and particularly in the first half, he was playing a defensive forward role on Hearn, and then when Hearn went off injured, he assumed the same role on McGovern, and I thought did a pretty okay job, and he played that role through the whole match. So I think that's probably needs to be factored into his game time in terms of the role Goody's asked him to play. But yeah, I think that if I can not see him corral for the rest of the season, and he brings that sort of minimum level of intensity in that second half, I'm happy for him to be in the best 22.
Let's jump in the midfield. The dynamic duo, don't need to talk too much about them. Clayton Oliver, Christian Petrarca, just beasts in the middle. Between them, they've had 56 possessions, 31 contested, 16 clearances, 12 score involvements, almost 700 metres gained. I don't think we need to dwell on how good they are. I think Track got 10 coaches' votes. And
I was going to ask you, Andy, were you surprised that he got the 10 coaches' votes?
I was a little bit because, I know the contribution that he gives, but I don't know. I thought Oliver was better. I was surprised Oliver only got 3, which means I think someone worked it out. I think he just got 3 from someone. So maybe one of the coaches. So I was surprised.
And I thought, they often seems to be who's influential. And I thought, I think Brown got a vote, didn't he? Did he get a vote? He did, I'm sure. And I thought he was really influential, Brown, in terms of the result, because it was in that first quarter that he kicked a couple and we took our chances, and that's the difference. You've got to take your chances. And it created a problem, particularly. I mean, it's probably worth noting that Hearn out was a big out for them. And in that second quarter when we did jump them, that Kennedy was off the ground for most of it. So, but, that's footy. So taking your chances is so important, and he did that. So I thought he was more influential than, even the coaches have given him credit for.
I'll give them the credit, Bimbo on Demonland in the coaches' votes thread worked out the votes for the coaches' votes, the split, but we don't, of course, know which coach gave who. Petrarca got 5 from both. Yo got 4 and 2. Jackson 4 and 0. Oliver and Brown both got 3 from one coach each. Nibbler got 2 from each coach, and Redden and Natanui got 1 each.
I wouldn't have given Natanui one.
Well,
you know where that vote came from.
Yeah, they posited that came from the West Coast coach.
Yeah. I mean, I'd be furious if he was a D's player. I mean, I know people love him, but I mean, he looks seriously 10 kilos.
I keep hearing his name from media for All Australian. I don't know where that's coming from. I mean, you look at the coaches' votes. He's in there.
He was totally gassed in that third quarter. He was running on fumes. As I said, I mean, he didn't get a possession in a whole quarter of footy. What's that about? I mean, and like their game is so structured around winning centre clearances from him. You take that away, and then suddenly his sort of influence on the game falls away. And I mean, sure, he kicked a nice goal in that last quarter, but it was only because he had a half an hour break to get ready for it, I reckon.
He's equal 15th on the coaches' votes, the highest Eagles listed player.
They're probably all from Simpson.
Possibly. Let's move on to Harms. I thought he had one of his best non-tagging games for the year. I think he was... haven't rewatched the game. I thought maybe he was manning Yo in some of the centre bounces, but he was getting a lot of his own ball, and he was a lot cleaner this week. 25 possessions, a beautiful long, low goal. Harms without Viney in the team. Well, we've got some audio. Maybe we'll play the audio from Gary and Tim's radio show. It's only a minute long. Hold on. 1 sec. Here we go. Oh, that's the wrong one. That's it. Hold on, guys. Won't bore you in the behind the scenes, but here we go.
This is an interesting question. Just came off the text. Melbourne without Viney in the midfield. The mix seems better. Thoughts on that?
Well, James Harms was, I suppose, Harms goes into the middle, and he was sensational yesterday. He kicks it better than Jack. No one goes at it harder than Jack. So there'll be a spot for Jack. But it's an interesting observation. He may end up being, Jack Viney may be the more accountable run-with midfielder. You know, if he gets back in. So if you take it on the Dogs in a big final, maybe he goes
the cooler
to Libber or to McRae or.
He's played that role before, hasn't he?
Well, he went to
a few years ago. He did that.
Well, he came back and went to Wyans and Mitchell in successive weeks, and not hard lockdown, but accountable at stoppage. So maybe that's where he's going to be.
Where are these two going to be, Harms and Viney? Once Viney returns, George?
It's a difficult one, isn't it? I'm going to take all the credit for his game this week because I canned him last week. So you better choose who you want to play well next week, and I'll go with
Melcham
the running.
Melcham.
Oh, yeah, he was.
No, hold off on that. Wait till we're playing a final. I don't care if he plays poorly against Adelaide.
Okay. Yeah, Harmsy. I think what I was talking about before, I think the conditions of the game suit Harms. Where he doesn't get exposed with his skills. He's a tough, hard-bodied, inside type of mid who will just scrap and scrap and scrap. And that's exactly what we saw in this game. He produces what's needed, particularly when you've got lots and lots of contested stuff around the ground, repeat ball-ups, all those repeat throw-ins. That's the sort of player that you need Harms to be. And the reason is, I don't think he's got a great football IQ in that sense. But when you've got a scrappy game, his opponent can't get away from him as much. There were a couple of times in this game where he was in the centre square ball up, and he completely lost the player, completely and utterly lost him. He's just not. He just hasn't got the same IQ as, say, someone like Viney in the middle. Put him around the outside, on the end, around the ground, completely different player. And we were getting exactly what we wanted out of this game. I think Goody used him brilliantly in this game. Again, he only played 54% game time. So I think Goody's playing him in exactly that role I was talking about. Go onto the ground, hit it hard, hit it short, come off and do your job again the next time I send you on. You don't need to be on the ground all the time trying to get to every contest. The previous game, we saw a lot of the old, I'm going to try and fend off and I'm going to push through. In this game, he's just pushed through, doing what he normally does, and we saw the best of it. So, different sort of game from him. It'll be interesting to see if we have good conditions against Adelaide this week and whether he can produce the same sort of results.
I think that Viney will come straight back in. I'm amazed at how down sort of D's are, of sort of Demonland's representative of Demon fans on Viney, because I guess there's two things. There's what we think as fans should happen and what will happen. It's a bit like with Melksham. What will happen is that Goodwin will pick him if he keeps his intensity level. Happens the same with Viney. Viney comes straight back into Goodwin's midfield. Personally, I think we missed him a little bit in that second quarter. That's exactly the scenario when he's so important as that defensive mid. And it's exactly, you're right, George, is that Harms is funny because that was set up really well for him, and the sort of thought about not having them together is that it allows Harms to thrive. But you need a defensive mid, and we lacked it in the second quarter. I mean, they really got us in contested ball. As I said, that 12 in one quarter is massive. With Viney in the team, it suddenly becomes +8, and that's a big difference. So he's not a tagger. He's a defensive mid. That sort of grunt come finals. It's easy to dismiss him as just a sort of fellow who runs through walls. Viney, this is, but that's exactly what you need in finals. And Goodwin's his whole mindset is about a way of playing that will win finals, and he is key to that. So he comes straight back in. I think I was really interested to read, and you noted it, George. I was amazed that Harms only had 54% game time. He seemed to be in the game the whole game, and definitely the best game he's played this season. And I like your sort of idea of him coming in as a shock, someone who can come in and do things under pressure. Another player probably who would benefit a lot with the way he plays from being a bit fresher, because he does, much to everyone's chagrin, try to take players on, but if you're fresh, you're going to be able to win more of those ones. And I thought, when he's up and about, he's got good energy, and the goal he kicked was super important. And that came off the back of really hard running. He was involved in that chain. That's the one that Jackson talked about. He had 11 contested possessions, Harms, which is pretty amazing, and 53% game time. So maybe that's the way they'll use him. There's still space for both of them, basically. If he's only playing 50% game time and Viney's on 80%, there's plenty of time for them to wax in the midfield. So just as a way of comparison, and showed how easy it is to forget how Oliver is. We skipped over him because we can't talk about Oliver and track every week.
That's what I thought, but
but
it's not taking anything away from it.
Totally fair enough. Arms actually we not only had 9 contested possessions, which is pretty good, particularly in 53%, 54% game time. Oliver had 21 contested possessions. Yeah. That's just crazy. 10 more than the next best, which was Jackson, amazingly, and Bowie had 10. So just shows how incredible Oliver is.
I'm just bringing up the stats while you keep talking. Oliver, in terms of contested possessions, and I hope I can find it quickly. I think he is absolutely killing. Where is it? Contested possession. Here we go. He's on 348 for the year, and the next one's Rory Laird with 301, so he's in nearly 50 ahead of the next player in the league. And then Ollie Wines is third on 288, so he's smashing it. 348 to 288. Petrarca has 280. So, yeah.
Next level.
He's fifth. Yep. So there you go.
I thought that was definitely his best game, and I think they can play together. Either way, I was thinking that Harms come finals, I still like him. Against the Dogs and the Cats, and they're probably even the Port. He's a player you can run with and do a good job and still get possessions himself. And even sort of the two of them can take the player.
Well, that's what I'm saying. What about Viney with taking players rather than... I guess he's got to do a mix of both, because you need him sort of going in there and the hard ball at times.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think tagging's got a specialist skill, and Harms is good at it. And if it's really a matter of more of tactically whether Goody decides to tag, and I think that come finals they'll try a bit of tactical mix changes, and I thought they did this game. We went a lot more central. We kicked to the top of the square more often. We did a number of things. May again went to the left hand side and up the middle a couple of times. So they might try. They may not tag, for instance. So. I think tactically they'll try some different things, but if they want to tag Harms is the guy.
Vanders came on as the medical sub when Hunt went off. It was his 50th game, which is great for him that way, but sadly I think the game may have passed him by, which pains me, as I'm a big fan, and his 2018 year was fantastic, and I admire him for his resilience to continually come back from that debilitating foot injury, which means he can't really train at all. I interviewed him last year. He talked about that. Unfortunately, that means the game may now be a bit too quick for him, may have passed him by. Is he just a placeholder now for Viney, or perhaps someone else to come in from him, George?
Yeah, I think that sums us up pretty well, Andy. And unfortunately, like you, I love him as a player. We all remember how great he is when he was at his best. But if there was one thing this game showed, is that he's that yard off the pace. And, he looked very slow. Yes, when he gets close enough to be able to tackle players, he is ferocious. Yeah. And you certainly don't want to be hit by him. But you've got to provide more than that in a game. Unfortunately, these days, you've got to be able to run for long periods of time, particularly when we're running team-structured type of defences. You can't afford to have too many players on the ground who can't put in for long periods of time. Unfortunately, it's great that he's got to 50 games, but I don't think there's going to be too many more available for him.
Big man?
I mean, maybe I don't know whether it's just, he looked a little bit like he was trying too hard when he came on.
He gave away 2 frees as well.
Yeah, and but the free that he gave in the back, just the one that he drove,
over
it was
the
so frustrating at the time because it was sort of it was like watching a slow motion car crash because you could say no, don't do it, and it was one of those ones where the ball's already over the boundary line, so it's of no value whatsoever, even the tackle, and slippery conditions. It's funny because when I saw him in the VFL, he's looked like he's running all right. Actually, it doesn't look like pace is a problem. So
that might be more of more the pace of
slippery, bad conditions for So
and the pace of the twos probably isn't as quick as AFL.
Yeah. So I mean, if you compare him coming on, like it's probably a tough comparison, but you mentioned last week Jordan came on and influenced the game straight away, didn't he? And looked clean, even though it was sort of only 15 minutes of footy time. That wasn't the case for Vanders, unfortunately. As you say, he seems like a great fella, and I love the way he tackles when he's not shoving someone's face into the turf and giving away a free kick, but. It's hard, leaving that aside, it's hard to see where he fits and what role he fits because he's not really a pure mid, not the way they play him. And they play him more as a high half forward, big marking thingo. And it's a bit like you can't really have him and sort of Melksham in the same team. Just, one provides a bit more pressure, but, you can't have two sort of medium tall forwards in that way, I don't think, in our setup. So,
well, I'm just having a look. Melbourne posted a picture on Twitter or somewhere on social media of all the players watching, the remaining players that weren't playing that are over there in Perth. They were in a corporate box or something watching the game. I'm just trying to find that picture. And now while I'm finding it, I can't find it at all. Here they are. So the players available that could have played, obviously T-Mac couldn't play. The players that are there is Hibberd, Majak Dor, Joel Smith, Chandler and Wiedemann. So do you think it was strange that we had Vanders as the next one to come in for this particular game and the conditions? Would you have maybe tried someone else? Obviously probably not Majak, he's big, but
well, he was.
I guess you don't know who's going to be injured.
But he's the medical sub. I wouldn't have thought he's the most natural medical sub in the sense that he's not particularly flexible where you play him. I would have thought of that lot. Smith is the one that's the most sort of the player who you could play forward, you could play back, you could, he's not going back to the halfback flank Vanders, is he? Smith, you could play him in. You could have directly swapped Smith for Hunt's role. Yeah, that's where he's played at Casey. So not that obviously they would have known that Hunt was being injured, but you could also play him forward in Nibbler's role as a pressure forward if need be, or, he would have seemed to have been a more flexible option. I suspect they wanted, maybe it's, I don't know, they would give, the tough conditions that they were thinking if we need a tough enforcer to come on, he's our best bet.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. Jake Bowie. What an absolute find this kid is. Off the back of an impressive debut last week, he's backed it up again. 21 possessions, 10 contested, 9 intercepts, 3 clearances. Most importantly, 81% disposal efficiency on a wet night. He rarely wastes a kick, and if not for getting caught in that last, which cost us a goal, and he would have had the perfect second match. And in fairness to him, when watching the replay, there looked to be very little talk from his teammates around him, most notably Lever, who was right there, and Kelly came out of nowhere, so you can't really fault him. I don't think you can label it as a lack of awareness or whatever, because I would say this kid has a lot of awareness. A bit of a yacht kick it might have done well. Big man.
He's fantastic, and I think we've talked about it a lot. Well, one thing he's kicking, as you said, he's so neat, and already I've got confidence when he's got ball in hand that he'll make it. It's two things, isn't it? It's the technique to do what you want to do, but also making good decisions to which options to take. The other thing that we've banged on about is sort of footy IQ, and he's got it. And there was early in the game, there was an occasion where I thought he was going to get run down from. You talk about awareness. I thought he was going to get run down from behind, and he just must sense that the player was close and gave off a handball. And I just thought in that moment, that's the sort of player who's that's hard to quantify what that is or even sort of nail it down. But that ability to know what's around you and, make good decisions. So many players would have got run down and then turned the ball over. He's clever, makes smart decisions. They're playing him in an interesting way. They're basically, him and Salem are playing a very similar role, I would have thought, George. He pushes up high and it looks like they've sort of almost got two Salems. Is that how you've seen how they're using him?
Yeah, I think that's exactly where he's being slated for the future. It gives you that half-back line, certainly for the future, of Salem, Rivers and Bowie, all great kicks.
Different kick. I know, Salem and Bowie are quite similar, actually, but Trent Rivers he's damaging kick in terms of the depth and distance he gets.
Yeah, and that's exactly what you want on the half-back line, people who are high football IQs, can see options that others don't and are able to deliver. So, he will slot in nicely about that.
I know that before you go on about Bowie, George, just on Rivers quickly while you said a big kick, I know there was a gale blowing, but he's shot for goal. I don't think he got it. It was a monster kick.
Yeah, that went 70 metres, didn't it? Because he kicked it from 50 and it cleared the fence.
Well,
he was only a point.
Yes.
Yeah.
But back to Bowie. You mentioned in the stats 9 intercepts. It's easy to just look at the number, but Jake Lever took 10 and May 6 and Salem 4.
Yeah,
this is a guy in his second game, for crying out loud.
And Rivers 10 and Petty 8. I mean, that's a defence that's working well. Isn't it?
Oh yeah, and it's just beautiful to watch. And Dazzle Davey, if you look at the Demonland threads in Jake Bowie thread itself, put up a rerun of there was a video of the Melbourne selection team at the draft choosing who they'd choose at pick 21 and 22. And it's interesting listening to Jason Taylor at that, and his comments all along for both of those players were, these are the best kicks available in the top 22, and they're also the ones who love football. So you'll get good workers out of these two guys. And if there's ever something that's coming to pass about Jason Taylor's insights into the players, it's certainly coming out in the proof that we're seeing with Jake Bowie on the ground, and we can only look forward to Bailey Laurie getting his chance as well.
Tell you
I've
what,
got a secret. I'm actually Jason Taylor. So, we both have pictures of good kicks on our posters on our wall.
Yeah, that's all we need. Good kicks. That's all I want. Draft good kicks. And what's important is what you just said about love their footy, and it will work hard.
Like Jackson, like Cozzy.
Yeah,
that's
because
right.
I had a mate went to school with who got drafted. Was the most naturally talented footballer I've ever seen. Hated footy, hated working hard. Obviously didn't make it as a result, despite the talent.
Yeah, you've got to love it. And I think, that's a really interesting point, George, because Rivers is the same boat as well, isn't he? And that just enthusiasm from those younger guys. I think it's a really interesting thing for the D's this year that, as I was talking about last week, we've got 5 players under 21. Petty's only 21, isn't he? Really close. So, Petty, we've got 4 players in the team who are 19 now. And one 18. He's only 18, isn't he, Bowie?
Yes, so, this is probably a good time to bring this up. Someone just posted on Demonland the squad, the 40 for the 22, under 22 has been released, and the D's have 5 in the squad. For the defenders, Petty, Rivers. Midfielders, James Jordan. Forwards, Cozzy Pickett. Rucks, Luke Jackson. Now, obviously, Bowie hasn't made it because he's been just...
But he'll be the rising star this week.
Well, he didn't get for this week. A poor player did, but I'm sure he'll get one in the remaining 2 games, provided he at least gets half a dozen, 15 disposals. I'm sure he'll get it. But yeah, our young
and we've
stocks...
got 3... Sorry, Andy. The favourite for the rising star is Luke Jackson. I'm spewing I didn't back him earlier in the season. And we've got 2 others in the Jordan and who's the third, but we've got three in the top. Not Rivers, I don't think he's, or maybe he is, but we've got three in the top 10 for betting. So in that, it's a solid sort of Jackson. So sorry, I mentioned Jackson. So yeah, we've got some young players who are not just in there and sort of making a contribution. They're key players to right on all the three lines, and it really augurs well for the next few years, I reckon.
I don't know how many of these midfielders, quite a lot of midfielders been named in this team, but I feel sorry for James Jordan because there's a lot of flashy names there, but I think James Jordan is up there, and I think he's so underrated by the rest of the AFL world. And that's fine, because let him do his job and be a very important cog in this wheel that we're rolling on through September. But yeah, I feel sort of, there's Walsh, Chera, Brayshaw, Sarong, Lukosius, Anderson, James Warple, Davies Uniacke, Shai Bolton, Bailey Smith, and there's a few others there, but I bet you he doesn't make it into the final squad. But who cares? It's a list in the end. So
he's a ferocious tackler too, Jordan. He's nailed. I didn't know who it was at first because he was sort of moving at speed, and there was a whole bunch of players around. And it was Jordan. Just completely nailed the West Coast players. He seems like a kid who enjoys playing footy. Just on Bowie and the way they're using him as that sort of I guess the other halfback flank and playing a very similar role to Christian Salem, is that it's interesting tactically, and I wonder whether obviously his kicking skills is something they want to in the team, and he was a midfielder, he was never a defender as a junior by all accounts, so they've trained him for this role. And I'm interested, George, what you're thinking in terms of other teams of putting time into Christian Salem now in recognition of how important he is to the way we move the ball from the halfback flank. I wonder if part of the thinking about bringing Bowie in is it makes it more difficult. You say, sure, you can shut down the influence of Christian Salem, but then what are you going to do with the fella on the other halfback flank who's hitting targets and distributing up the wing and helping us transition it? So I wonder whether that was part of their thinking to sort of disrupt the sort of tactical work by other coaches.
It's actually just the hallmark of a good team, isn't it? You can shut down one player, but there's always a second or a third coming up. And I think it's just that we are building a side, and this is what Goody's been talking about for the last couple of years. We are building a side to win finals, and being able to put someone in that slot like Bowie is just the next piece in the big jigsaw. But he's certainly a very nice piece, even after two games. We're seeing similar sorts of things to other players all around the ground. I think for the last couple of weeks, certainly the second half of the season, other coaches have been telling everyone, do not kick it down the Langdon wing, and we saw it the same in this game. They were prepared to sacrifice Gaff, I think, certainly in the first quarter, just so that it didn't go down that side of the ground, because they just know how damaging he is. And Bowie will be the same. They just know how damaging he is. They're doing it to Salem because they know how damaging they are. But they run out of players in the end that they've got to shut down.
And it sort of goes to the point we've made a few times this year, George, around when coaches do things to disrupt us, is that it comes at a cost. And I was amazed to hear the commentators talk about in the first quarter that they had one less forward because they were tagging, using that player to tag Lever.
Lever, yep.
So I just thought that was a remarkable concession for, that's a huge thing to do, to give up one of your forwards, and they're not particularly strong on the ground up there, although they actually were much better than they have been all year because of they played with the ferocity, intensity. That was why they were able to overcome it. But that was a huge gamble to drop a forward out of your forward line to disrupt us, and we still ended up 14 points up at the end of the first quarter.
And it didn't work either. And
it didn't work.
It shows that Simpson's out of ideas.
Sorry, Andy.
I think it just shows Simpson's out of ideas, and he's heard that other teams are potentially trying to man up on Lever. I'll do the same.
Yeah, and it's more that, like, sure, you can do that and you can put a defensive mid on it, but Sydney did a similar thing too. Remember, they tried to chop him out, and you end up you sacrifice a bit, and it's almost a concession. If you're, it's a different thing to making a tactical thing, like you're going to maybe tag Libba in a different way, but if you had changed the way you play in order to try and negate an opposition's strength, well, it's sort of the opposition's already in front of the ball game.
Let's move on. Our back line. You already mentioned the stats that I said, and we won't go into it too much. Lever 10 intercepts, Rivers 10, Bowie 9, Petty 8, 6 to May, and Lever 10 spoils, May and Petty 6. I just wanted to, we don't need to talk about all those guys, but I wanted to highlight once again Petty's breakout year. Earlier in the year, we were celebrating our three-headed dragon in defence, and then we lamented the slaying of one of the heads of the dragon when Adam Tomlinson went down with his knee injury. But this reptile was able to regrow one of its heads in the form of Harrison Petty, and his confidence has grown every week, and in turn my confidence in him. I really love this guy, and he's a solid part of the team. I can't imagine the back line without him now, and it'll be interesting to see what happens next year when Tomlinson's back. I know that's slightly different players, but Petty has slotted in very nicely. You wouldn't have thought he wasn't part of this original lineup.
When you were talking before about the players under the age of 22, we forgot all about him, didn't we? He is something very special again, and boy, he's as you've just said, he just slots in beautifully with the rest of the side. He knows his role, he knows when to go for the punch, he knows when to go for the mark. Once again, it's just become so hard for the opposition when you've got players like him playing alongside the Levers and May. You can go to one, you've got a couple of big forwards, but you can't cover the whole lot of them. It just becomes so difficult for them. I think West Coast in this particular game were lucky in the sense that they had Darling and they had Kennedy, who were able to kick goals and take timely marks when they did, or get timely free kicks. Because the rest, our defence didn't fail. It was only these occasional capabilities that they've got, or gifts that they were given, and most of them, as it turned out, were from a fair distance out. You don't expect players like Kennedy to be kicking in conditions like that from well outside 50. Cripps did the same. So yeah, they took full advantage of their opportunities, but they weren't given too many by the defence.
He's got good hands, hasn't he? That he took a mark. I think it was even the opening minute of play where they were attacking, and read it beautifully.
He backs himself as well.
He backs himself, takes clean marks. I watched the Geelong Giants game, and Taylor looks a gun, and he reminds me a lot of, Petty reminds me a lot of Taylor, whichever way you go. Reads the ball quickly. He killed Hawkins, and part of it was that he didn't get involved in a wrestling match with him. And ran off him at every opportunity, but just seemed to, the Giants did a great job of putting pressure on that kick inside 50. So, Hawkins couldn't get it how he likes to, on top of his head to outmuscle his opponent. And Taylor just seemed to read it so well and have the courage to go for it, and then ran off him. And it made me think, if we play Geelong again, we will be playing them again.
We will be in 2 weeks.
And jumping ahead already to finals. That they could, instead of, having May, who would be the obvious one, who we have played on him, and we played Tomlinson on him early, and then May moved to him once Tomlinson, the other way around. Once May got injured, Tomlinson went to him. So logic would suggest that Tomlinson would, May would be the player most likely to go to them. But you reckon there'd be a chance that Petty could play him in the same sort of way as Taylor did, and take advantage of his ability to be aggressive and intercept. And as you say, I think you hit the nail on the head. He backs himself. He's confident. He goes for it. And then suddenly you've got, 100%, as George says, sure, you've shut down Lever, but then you've got Petty, who's intercept marking. And you don't really shut down May because he's sort of shutting down someone else. So, my tip is he'll be an All-Australian defender before he sort of hits 25, 26.
Yeah. I was going to talk about the umpiring next. I think we've covered it. I was disgusted by the last 10 minutes, but all up, I think they had plus 10 or 11 free kicks on the night, so I don't need to go into that. It'll just make me angrier than I need to be on a Tuesday night.
One positive, though, on that was that non-50 against Petty, speaking of Petty.
Yeah. That was awesome. My last point there.
That was awesome. I was just thinking, that's just great. He's like trolling all of those wet, sort of fearful of electricity Eagles fans because it was 50. But I like the way Petty had it between his feet, and he just wasn't going to call it. That was the best non-decision that I've seen this year.
And look, you said something about there's no stats for frees not paid. They don't supply that. I think I'm going to start. Start keeping a tally. On that. And anyway, I'll move on. Inaccuracy, again, the bane of my existence at the moment. We kicked some lovely goals this week, but boy, oh boy, we needed some clutch steadiers in the last. Even before the break, we had a couple. Especially from set shot. We couldn't hit the side of Barn. Fritsch missed everything. Jackson missed a sitter. Track missed from close, albeit he was on a tight angle, but he probably should have check-sided it instead of trying to kick a straight kick through a small angle. Max was missed earlier in the game. We can't afford to miss these easy set shots. In the pressure of finals, we need to be nailing every single opportunity, and it could cost us big time. And this, as I said, has not a week. It's not just this week, it's been a number of weeks throughout the whole year. I'm sick of it.
What do we do about it, though,
Andy? I don't know.
There was an interesting suggestion on Demon Land today as far as Max. They said he should kick it left foot because the right foot is completely useless in terms of ability to kick in a straight line. But even in this game, there were a number of occasions where he came out of the centre with his left foot and he kicks it brilliantly. So maybe he should be trying that with his set shots instead of the right foot.
Look, I'm sure they kick them at training when they're practicing.
Yeah.
I said last week it might be mental.
Yeah, you would think so, but unfortunately, in terms of Max's right foot kicking for goal, he is consistent with that swinging action. Again, the commentators, I think, had actually picked up in this as well. As soon as I saw it, it was the same, coming back to what Binman said last. Why is he spinning that ball around? You should be holding the ball still over the kicking foot and just being deliberate. You've only got to look at Ben Brown, how accurate he is, because he has the same technique, the same reliable technique as what other great goal kickers have, and none of them spin the ball around. So maybe you should be following the same technique.
And an example, it's tough for a player that tall, like that sort of exacerbates that technique because it's harder to get the ball on the foot. But Mason Cox is about the same height as Max, I reckon, maybe even taller. Yeah. He's an American who's come in and learnt the game from scratch, and he is a beautiful set shot for goal, and for exactly the reason you just said, George. He just puts it directly in a straight line from down to his foot, and he's, he'd probably be one of the most accurate set shot kicks in the AFL, I reckon, in terms of his stats. And I don't know why Max Gawn, maybe it's just too late in his career to learn it, but geez, I'd love for him to go away over summer.
What about? Go ahead.
Right, imagine how much more damaging a player he would be if he was more accurate.
What about 2 metre Peter? Did you see him on the weekend? 7 goals, and he's 2 metres, as his name suggests.
Yeah, the same thing with him though. His technique is absolutely straightforward. There's nothing. He's not wobbling around. He's not trying to do all these funny things. Just drop the ball straight onto the foot.
And don't move the ball.
Yeah,
if you can. The other one, Kennedy's. I really think Kennedy's a fantastic footballer, a real old school footballer. Mark he took was terrific. The contested mark, but even though he's got that funny skip the way he runs. If you watch the ball, it does not move, and it goes directly onto his boot. And funnily enough, that one, I don't know how it went through. It seemed to arc like a boomerang. That's same with Darling. He's also got an excellent set shot.
Yeah, I was thinking the other day. Remember the Luke Shuey goal that killed Collingwood to win a premiership? Which one of our midfielders would you like in the same situation?
It wasn't Shuey, was it? It was, do you mean from the boundary?
Dom Sheed.
Dom Sheed, sorry,
yeah.
Which one of our midfielders would you like doing in the same situation?
Not Oliver, not Viney, not Petrarca, not Harms,
not
Max.
Yeah, does that tell you something? Yeah.
Like Oliver kicked one the other week from a set shot, but he's missed so many more during the year.
And unfortunately, in that case, that was what won a premiership, and that's what finals are all about.
We would have put that on the full. That would have gone on the full on the other side. Petrarca kicked a beautiful. That kick was straight as an arrow. That one he got from Nibbler was a big booming kick.
No step.
One step, no step, whatever. It didn't deviate.
Yeah.
But if he was having a set shot, he would not have kicked that.
Yeah.
And it's weird because he, in his first season after his knee injury, he was really accurate. And I'm sure, maybe I think I said this a couple of weeks ago, I'm sure in my mind he had a much more economical sort of run up and fewer steps and certainly less movement of the ball in his hand as he was coming in and spinning the ball. And so...
let's preview all the changes for Adelaide. I guess one depends on Tom back, whether he's back. Obviously, Hunt will be out, I would assume, barring a miracle. So maybe who comes in for Hunt, who goes out for T-Mac, if T-Mac's ready. Big man, you want to take that?
It's interesting.
Your choice.
5 days. I wonder whether they'll...
Game is on Sunday at 2:10.
Has that been announced?
Yes,
so
today.
They've got, it does make me wonder whether they might actually rest a couple of players. It's been a big couple of weeks.
Another thing, just quickly, the Adelaide ruckman, O'Brien, is out.
Oh, wow, that's a big one.
Yeah.
So
they have no second ruck.
So does that change your thoughts?
I just did. The press was interesting, and the Goodwin's a lot more relaxed in the presses. But I think it's probably helped because it's on Zoom, and he probably hasn't got that crew of people in front of him staring at him. But he was asked about Tom McDonald coming back, and his sort of answer was a bit funny in terms of he talked about not having a tall at all, and I wonder whether they'll give Tommy Mack the week off and not bring in Wiedemann and go with a smaller forward line again, just for to get some run into those players that they might want to be ready for the final. So, what do you do with Captain Jack? So does he go out? He didn't have a really strong game, but maybe they want to get game time into him. Jordan, what happens with Jordan? It'll be interesting at selection this week. The pattern's been no change as much as possible, hasn't it? So
someone's got to come in for the run of Hunt. Do we bring Hibberd back?
Hibberd dropped off, but he would be the logical person for Hunt. But with Bowie in there, you've got a bit of run off that halfback flank. You've got, but you're right. Hibberd's probably the logical one. That was the way he used to play before, sort of moving to a more of a lockdown role this season. He looked a bit slow, but again, that might be that loading stuff. I can't think of another player who would sort of slot in on that halfback line. Maybe I can never remember his name. The small back. He's not really a run and carry. I'll think of his name in a sec.
For us,
yeah, the player that we sort of always thought would replace Jetta.
Lockhart.
Yeah, Lockhart, but he's not really a run and gun sort of player, is he? So
what's happened to him? He just couldn't get back in. Yeah,
he played the last game at Casey, but that was a couple of weeks ago now, and he certainly wasn't on the plane to Perth. No. The more likely one would have been Smith, but I don't.
Yeah. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think you want to be bringing Smith in 2 games out from the season, from the end of the season, sort of thing. The lead up to finals. But it is going to be interesting as to what they do. You might be right, Bin Man, that they'll not essentially make any changes because do you leave Melcham in this week? Do you leave Jordan in? Do you leave Vandenberg in or not? Based on that game, he probably wouldn't.
It's really tricky not having the VFL game because where does it leave a player like Jones to sort of get some match fitness? You know, do you bring him in? I can't see them giving Vandenberg another game. Might be wrong, but I can't. Jordan will stay in. So
I only thought Jones would be a possible as a medi sub leading in simply because you keep Jordan into the side, you drop Vandenberg because he hasn't shown anything.
Yeah. I mean, if they knew the lockdown was coming, I'm sure they would have taken Jones to Perth.
Yeah.
But presumably they wanted him to get some game time.
Yeah, they couldn't actually. I don't think they could actually get him in with the original plans of. They were originally planning to fly from Brisbane directly to Perth.
Yeah.
That was stymied. But it's going to be a difficult decision this week, particularly with Adelaide. We'll talk about that one now.
Go talk about that now. Go.
Yeah. If O'Brien's not available,
definitely not. That was announced today.
Yeah, right. They've got no one in the ruck. I can't remember who their second possibility was. Anyhow, they've got no Crouch. Tex Walker's out. But what was interesting, I watched the game against Port. They played Adelaide played exactly the same way that they played against us earlier in the season. That was just to turn it into a scrap. And I think that's the danger for us going into this game. If we get our skills on full display, we will rip them apart. But if they manage to slow it up and turn it into a scrap, we might find ourselves in the same situation as Port did. Now, Port won the game eventually by 19 points, only after some brilliant efforts by the Butters and the Rosies and people like that. But they were down 10 points going into the last quarter. They've got some real capability to bring us down to their level, sort of thing. So, but we don't want to fall for that. They brought Lynch back into the side, who while he's announced his retirement at the end of the season, he's the sort of winger who they consistently go through, and he delivers beautifully up into their forward line. They struggle for forwards, particularly without Tex up there. Fogarty was thrown down there this week, and he's a big, strong player, but I think we've got the players to certainly cover him. But we don't want to, like we have done in a couple of games, taking this as too easy. They're away from home, but they can drag you down to their level pretty quickly, and we don't want to see that happen.
When they beat us, you're right. They played a good brand of contested footy in that game, but they really attacked through the corridor, and it was our lack of sort of defensive spread that allowed them to get some looks through the centre. If they try that again, there's a good chance we'll swamp them. So you're right, George. Their best bet to beat us is to make it a scrap. I think you're also right. It was a good point. I reckon it was great that we had a really good competitive hit out against West Coast. So that you need that coming into the finals. I think you need sort of to have those competitive juices flowing and a tough game. Not to say this one won't be, but it won't be in front of a crowd, so it won't have that intensity. I'm just hoping that we get away. I'd be more than happy with 3-4 goal win. I can't see them coming out with the same sort of energy that they did against the Suns and crush them. It's sort of now, it's interesting, isn't it, with the run into the finals, is that, for all of the concerns about the losses, it's come to naught, hasn't it? We're locked in top four. Didn't matter that Collingwood beat us, exactly as we're talking about. It didn't matter that we got a draw against Hawthorn. Didn't matter that Giants beat us. The Giants
I might have something to say about that in a moment. So continue.
I hope your doomsday scenario.
Oh yeah, just wait. It's coming up.
Whether it factors in my concerns about finishing top, given what I was saying last week about 8 of the 10, only one in the last 10 years has flag been one from top, and 8 of 10 have been in that first qualifying final.
But that's psychological. It doesn't. What does it matter if you finish top or second?
I reckon there might be something in it, because as I was saying last week,
that's
often
a
what
statistic.
happens is 1v4 is the least competitive of the matches, and that's not great preparation for a cutthroat must-win prelim. That's possibly part of the thinking.
But it depends who we play. And we'll talk about this in a minute. If you want to continue talking about the Adelaide game, but if we play Port, maybe that can in Melbourne that might be seen as non-competitive. But if we end up playing Geelong or Bulldogs, it's a different story.
Well,
from first position.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, from first position, I guess it depends what happens. That's true.
Yeah.
That's
and
true.
I'll go through that in a minute. So,
I mean, in terms of, I don't know about you, George and Andy, I'd be happy with 3-4 goal win. We want to win though. We don't want to have a slip up at this stage. We want to keep the momentum going. You want to come into the finals winning, or at least winning this match. It'll be really interesting. I know we're jumping ahead a week, but how they play the Geelong game, because in terms of there's no way that they're going to show all their hand tactically or effort or,
Particularly because there's a high percentage, I posted it somewhere today, that we'll be playing them 2 weeks in a row. So we'll be playing them the next week.
Yeah. So
not that we will, but that's the highest percentage.
Yeah, there'll be lots of ducks and drakes in that game, and almost the result, because it's down there at Cardinia Park, will be meaningless in some respects.
But having said that, you need to win the game, because nightmare scenario, doomsday scenario could be. Anyway, continue.
So, I mean, in terms of the preview for this game, I think that we'll just go back to our system. Question will be how much pressure. If we bring the sort of pressure that we brought in the first quarter of this game and the first quarter of the last game, the Suns game, then, we get that wave going and that run and that swarm go, well, we'll crush them. And if they match us and we still do it, we'll crush them at some point. So, the way I see it going is just, getting a lead, getting a 4 or 5 goal lead, hopefully kicking accurately. Haven't checked the weather forecast yet, so hopefully weather's not a factor. Getting a 4 or 5 goal lead, and if it's a pattern of the way we've played, we're probably going to be happy with a 4 or 5 goal win.
And you'd think also that in a game like this, here is the opportunity for those players that we talked about who are maybe they're in the team or not.
Yeah,
you're 2 weeks out from the finals or a week out from the finals. You really want to put on a great personal display. So, you really need to show it in this game. You can't afford to be coasting, because someone else will come in and take your position.
Yeah, and on the flip, this is a classic setup for Adelaide. They're coming to the end of a long season. They're not making finals. All of their players are, already thinking about postseason. Some are already probably gone into surgery. You've got the whole Tex Walker nightmare for the club, and all of that stuff that obviously distraction for them. There's not much on the table for those teams, and exactly as I say, George, there's players who are playing for their opportunity to play in the finals. So a remarkable thing for me this year is the sort of discussion around who's going to finish 8th. It just feels so weird that we're not involved in that. It's like I look back and go, oh God, those, they're fighting for crumbs back there for 8th, but almost every other year I would have worked out all the permutations by now and what we need to have happen. And
well, positions 7th and 8th are wide open according to the AFL Live Ladder Twitter account. 56%. So this is 7th and 8th are wide open. Who's going to make the AFL finals? 84% chance winner of the Giants Tigers on Friday night will make. Whoever wins that will make it. But at the moment, Richmond are a 56% chance. West Coast 44% chance. GWS 39. Essendon 33. St Kilda 15. Fremantle 12. Carlton 1% chance. There are still at least 3,700 possible final 8s. 3,700 possible final 8s. The most likely permutation with a 3% chance is Melbourne, Western Bulldogs, Geelong, Port Adelaide, Brisbane, Sydney, Richmond, West Coast. So Melbourne, Western Bulldogs, Geelong, Port, Brisbane, Sydney, Richmond, West Coast. That's maths.
3%.
3% chance. And
Well,
that's the
Andy,
most likely.
with those sort of stats, we have to hear about your run home.
So, would you like?
Scenario.
What I'll ask you. I was going to ask you at the end. What is your preference for us to play first up in a final? Where, who, when?
I don't care about all the others. We're going to be playing top four.
Yep.
What I don't want is us having to play Port Adelaide in Adelaide.
That's the doomsday scenario. So don't jump ahead of yourself. Who do you want to play? Would you prefer to play Port in Melbourne, no crowds? Port in Tasmania or West Coast or Brisbane?
Port anywhere but Port Adelaide.
Okay.
The problem with I want to play Geelong.
Yeah.
Because I think our game, the Port Adelaide are a team that can win a given match if they get up and about. They've got the talent and they've got the pace. If they catch you, they score and get on a roll. They're a team that can do that. Cats can too, but I just think our game plan really takes their strengths away, whereas it doesn't really so much for Port. I think we do a really good job of, we match up well against them. I think we're a better team, and we've got a defensive system that really negates their strength, which is the way they've set up their forward line. And but Cats, I just think that our way of playing is kryptonite for them because, they love to chip it around and move it around and move the team around. And, the way the Giants played them is exactly how we would play them. We've got a better defensive system than the Giants and we've got a better zone, but the same deal. High pressure in their face. The Cats just couldn't transfer the ball away, control the tempo the way they like to do it. And once that you take that away from them, they can't isolate Hawkins, and they rely so much on getting the ball into him one-on-one. So they do that either by really quick sort of movement. Once they rebound off the halfback flank with intercept marking. Giants took that completely away from them, predominantly because of pressure on that last kick inside 50, or they chip it around until they orchestrate a sort of a chink in the armour, and then they move it up, and they've got those set plays where Hawkins lead into a lane. Giants just took that away from them. We will too. So my preference would be to play the Cats at the MCG first week of the finals.
But you're not factoring in Cameron playing in that team.
Cameron, he's still out injured.
All right, but he'll likely be back.
It's same setup as 2 talls, 3 talls. That's fine. But, we make it crowded back there. They need space, those players, to move into. No one takes many. Contested marks are really rare against all in AFL right across the board. They're even rarer against us. So he's a good footballer. Don't get me wrong, but he doesn't hold really major concerns.
There's still a possibility that we will play Geelong 3 times before this season has finished, as in the home and away and finals.
If that's the case, then I'd be fairly happy. My theory would be have plenty of opportunities to be tested then. So
either way, even if we lose in round 23, if we win in round 23, there are quite good possibilities that we'll play them through. If we then play them in that first week of finals, then we can then play them again in the grand final, depending on how things work out. But I'm getting way ahead of myself. So we've locked in a top 4 berth. We can't be dislodged. But there's still that one doomsday scenario that can play out that we don't want to occur. I certainly don't want to occur. George, you just said you don't want it to occur. And ironically, if this scenario were to occur, a loss in our match against the Hawks instead of a draw would have been preferable, because then we could have avoided it. Now, I know there have been upsets galore since I made my 600 permutations and predictions using the AFL ladder predictor at our mid-season review. And not one of them put us on top of the ladder with 2 rounds to go, with the exception of my Dreamtime scenario, which had us winning every game, but even that didn't pan out. So this week, if in this week, this round 22, everything goes to plan, we beat the Crows, because how could we ever lose to a bottom 4 team?
Because good teams don't.
Yes, the Cats beat the Saints, because how could St Kilda do anything unpredictable this year? The Bulldogs beat the Hawks because the Hawks haven't upset anyone this year. And Port expectedly beat the Blues because teams with coaches sort of hanging by a thread or playing their final matches, or even teams with a caretaker coach, because it's still early in the week, anything can happen, they never shockingly beat a team. So, okay, we're going to go with the expected scenario happened this week, and all the top 4 teams, the current 4 top teams, are going to win their matches going into the final round. All right? So round 23, it's simple. We win, then we're on top. Case closed, easy peasy. Nothing is ever easy peasy at Demonland. I'm not sure how many times this has happened in history of the AFL, but I'm betting it's not that often that the top 4 all play each other in the final round. I mean, that wouldn't happen that often. So here's my doomsday scenario. We lose to the Cats. Port beats the Dogs at Marvel. Cats finish first. Port finish second. We finish third. Bulldogs finish fourth. That means we play Port in Port. We're off to Port in front of a hostile crowd for the first final. We don't want that to happen at all. I bet, B-Man, you'll say that that's not a problem. We beat them there once and we'll beat them there again, anytime, anywhere. Is that right, B-Man?
And our game plan, matches up really well against them. So, but of course, that wouldn't be our optimal option.
No, because you don't want to lose. I mean,
we don't want to play in Adelaide if we can avoid it. But
exactly. There is another nightmare scenario that is having to play Geelong in Geelong twice, and even more of a nightmare scenario would be being forced to play Geelong in Geelong as a home final, as our home final, mind you, in Geelong. That would be a killer, but I'm sure we would, we would be able to ask for it to be. I'd have that in Brisbane or anywhere else. Tasmania if we have to, because they probably never have to travel there. But the perfect scenario now is to finish top and play Port at the G. No crowds, low crowds, whatever. If games, and I asked you that, where you would like to play. So that's that. It's the run home.
I reckon if we'll win this week, and I personally wouldn't be totally feel terrible if we lost to Geelong the next week, because then we would likely finish third and they finish second and we played them in that first final.
Yeah, because it's like, look, I think Bulldogs, anything can happen. We saw Bulldogs lose to Essendon, but they should beat Port at Marvel.
Yeah.
So if that happens, we lose as long as we beat Adelaide this week. If the Dogs beat Port and we lose to Geelong, we'll then play Geelong again the next week.
Yeah, and that would be, I'd be happy with that. Although
in Geelong again,
yeah, Geelong. We play Geelong. They beat us in a low scoring, in a tight match, but we don't play all of our cards and we come out the following week and just smash them. That's how I want it to roll.
Do you think that game will be?
I don't really want us to get beaten.
No, I know, I understand. But do you think we'll play Geelong in Geelong? Do you think the AFL will throw them a bone? Because I don't think there are going to be crowds in Melbourne, or extremely low if there is.
Well, you couldn't play. They won't. They can't do that. I'd rather play them in Perth, because you can't give the team that. Well, it depends. If they finish second, I guess. Well, no.
Well, I'm saying if they're the home team.
Yeah, I don't know. I could see that happening. That it's a bit of a doomsday scenario to play them twice in 2 weeks in a row at Cardinia Park. Yeah. That doesn't bear thinking about. So now I've got a headache.
The good news is that there was a COVID case in Geelong today.
Well, we won't say any COVID cases are good news. I heard it was in Lara and they had been quarantining during the entire infectious period. So
that's close. That's close enough. Yeah.
Well, funnily enough, I guess it would be pretty hard for the AFL to push back if there were no crowds at the G allowed, but there was crowds allowed at Cardinia Park, and even if it was only 15,000, imagine the bloody Geelong advertiser.
Well, we wouldn't be able to go to that game anyway, even if we could get a ticket, because we probably at that stage, depending on lockdown, whatever, can't travel 5 kilometres. It would all be Geelong supporters.
1 week at a time, Andy.
Yep.
This ladder, they've got to get rid of the ladder predictor, or you should be able to opt out.
For your sake.
I've got to opt out of it.
It's not good for you, Andy.
Yeah, I think so. But we've made top 4. There's none of this worrying about the top 8 and worrying about other teams. It's simple for us. We've got to win.
Andy, you need to get an audio clip of George saying a few weeks ago, look, forget all of that. You've just got to win what's in front of you. So this week, let's beat Adelaide and then work out how we're going to progress the following week.
Then I think back to when we played, if we just beaten Adelaide, when we played them, if we had just beaten Hawthorn, that extra 2 points. I mean,
we're 6 points clear on top of the ladder.
You know, Collingwood, all those guys, we would have been laughing all the way to the finals. Did any of you guys receive your mail out from the club telling us that we'd made? No, we didn't. We didn't get one. I'm still waiting for the one from 2018. I think that will get a. Oh, my cricket sounds is gone. All right. Anything else, boys?
No, I'm not even going to think of a ladder predictor again. But
well, there is also a finals predictor as well. You can go through all weeks of the finals, and that one's a doozy as well. Maybe next week we can dip our feet into and imagine what the run into finals. We'll know a bit more. We'll have a bit more data to input into our data. And then because look, these upsets can happen and it can change everything. So let's see what happens. All right, boys. Thank you, Big Man. Thank you, George. We'll be back next week. Go Demons.
Go Redlegs.
Come on, Demons. Come on, Demons. Come on, Demons.